Hi, I'm Annie from Hoop Sisters, and in this video we're going to show you how to do one of the cathedral window blocks, this one right here, in this section of Elegant Elements. And there's a little bit of preparation work that's required on the regular sewing machine before starting. But first I want to show you what you're going to need to make it. You're going to have to hoop your battilizer. If you're using wool batting, you're going to need to prepare that. Cut it the right size and press the edges. And you're going to need in this block fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 4, and fabric 8, and also your backing fabric. Now the two fabrics you're going to have to do a little preparation work are on our fabric 2, which here I'm doing 9-inch blocks, so I cut a 10-inch strip the width of the fabric. And in a minute I'm going to cut on diagonal on strips on the bias. And then also you're going to need your fabric 4, and on your fabric 4 you're going to, for the 9-inch block, you'll cut an 11-inch square and you're going to cut it in half diagonally twice. This just happens to be 2 of those pieces. So let me cut my fabric 2 on the bias, and then we'll go to the regular sewing machine and we'll prepare those things. Okay. On our fabric 2, this is where we need to cut 1.5-inch strips on the bias. So what I've done is I've laid my strip of fabric right along one of the lines on my cutting mat and along even with the edge. And on my ruler I have found my 45-degree mark. And this is just one of many ways to cut fabric strip on the bias. I have the ruler so that it is not going to cut into the selvage because I don't want to use that. And then I'm just going to cut that right there. And then I'm going to take this away, and on my ruler markings I'm going to find my 1.5-inch mark and lay it on there. And I need a total of 8. So there's 2 because there's 2 sides of the fabric. And there is 2 more. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut a total of 8 of these. This is my fabric 4, and again this is the bias edge. Actually, this is the bias edge. The other blocks are opposite of this one, but I'm going to take this fabric and I'm just going to sew it right here along the bias edge. And if you look at the instructions, you'll be able to see that here's your fabric 4 and your fabric 2. You're going to do 4 on this side and 4 on that side. So let me get those prepared for you. Once you get your 8 bias strips cut, hang on to the rest of this fabric. This will be used for some of the other cathedral window blocks. Okay, I have these sections ready to go to sew fabric 2 to fabric 4. So I have my right sides together, and you might want to notice that I have the white strip going here on the triangle and then on the opposite side. And that is also, by the way, what it shows you in your instructions, and that's because you're going to have a left and a right side. And it might not make sense now, but that's okay. When we get to where we actually put those sections on the quilt block, it'll definitely make sense to you. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch foot and just a neutral thread. So there's 1 finished. And we're going to have a total of 8. I'm only going to do 2 for the video. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these to an ironing board, and I'm going to turn this and give it a really good press. And then we will be able to come back and actually start our block on the embroidery machine. So I'm excited. Okay, so this is our F1 block in our Elegant Elements quilt. And there's a button on my screen that I can push so that I can see exactly what stitches out at that moment. And that's very helpful when you're looking at our instructions, because that's basically what the picture is of, so that may help you in stitching out your block. So I have my machine ready to go. For step 1, you're going to hoop your battleizer, which we already did. And in the needle, you're going to put either water-soluble thread or just a neutral embroidery thread. I have water-soluble in there. And I have embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin. And I'm just going to hit the start button, and the machine's just going to sew a placement stitch, and that's going to show me where to place my wool batting. Okay, I'm ready for step 2, and this is the adding the wool batting, and you're just going to center that right inside that placement stitch, leaving the water-soluble thread, and it's going to sew a zigzag stitch, and that would be the reason why you press the edges to get them nice and flat. Another thing I wanted to tell you that you need to do is that you need to raise your presser foot as high as it'll go, and that will avoid the presser foot getting caught in that lofty wool batting. For step 3, we're going to stitch the pattern of this block right on top the wool battleizer. Another good reason to make sure that your presser foot is raised to the highest position. We still have water-soluble thread in the needle. Another thing that you will need to do is just hold your finger ahead of the needle. I'm actually not even moving my finger because the hoop is moving, just to make sure that the wool batting is pushed down. And it just helps keep it from getting caught. And if it does, it's not a problem. You just cut it out of there and keep on going. So there's our pattern, and we're ready for step 4. For step 4, you're going to take your fabric 8 and you're going to lay it over this part of the pattern. You're going to want to make sure that your corner, that the fabric extends beyond the corner and at least a 1/4 of an inch up towards the top, and that you have everything covered up, and then you can go ahead and stitch it. I still have water-soluble thread in the needle, so now we're just going to sew the tack down to hold that fabric to the wool batting and the battleizer. After it stitches the tack down in step 4, you're going to want to trim this a 1/4 of an inch, scant 1/4 of an inch away from the stitching. And after that, you're going to put your thread A and the needle only, and it's going to sew some embroidery over the top of the green fabric. So this is step 5 with thread A in the needle only and still embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and it's going to sew some embroidery. Okay, there's our embroidery for step 5. In step 6, we're going to use Wonder Tape. It's a water-soluble, double-sided tape, and I believe it was step 4 we did to tack down the green fabric. It did the tack down stitch, but it also, you may have seen it stitched down the center. That stitch is there so that you know where to put the edge of your Wonder Tape. Isn't Linda smart to think of that? Don't tell her I said that. We're going to put that on both sides so it looks like they're butting up to each other, and they pretty much are. And I'm going to peel one side away. And that's our prepared pieces of fabric 2 and fabric 4. You can see here they are. They've been pressed. We are going to put this a 1/4 of an inch past this line that was stitched. We are going to put the folded edge of that right up, or the seamed edge, right up to that line of stitching where the edge of the Wonder Tape is, and we're going to make sure it sticks down real nice. It's going to, probably could have put that up a little bit further, but just tape that down there. And our next step, we have water-soluble thread in the needle, and it's going to sew a tack down stitch around this entire bottom part of this, right, this triangle area of the block. So again, take the second one, take that seamed edge, just butt those edges right up to each other, and just finger press it to this tape, smooth it out, and it's going to stitch a tack down stitch to hold that. Alright, there is my 2 prepared sections all tacked down. Now for step 7, you're going to take your fabric 1, lay it right sides down with your raw edges even. And I have just neutral embroidery thread in the bobbin. I happen to have white in there. And we're going to go ahead and stitch a seam. For step 8, there's a couple things that we're going to do. First of all, this is where we're going to add our backing fabric. And this is going to be my backing fabric. So over my trash can, let me just give it a little squirt of some temporary spray adhesive. And I'm going to center my backing fabric. I'm just going to make sure I have everything covered up. I'm going to flip it back over, give it a more firm press. And the other thing that's going to happen with this step is, besides adding the backing fabric and tacking it down with water-soluble thread, this is also where we're going to flip our fabric 1 over. And it's at the same time going to tack that in place, as well as give us a pattern of where we need to make this flip over in order to make the cathedral window. So let's take it over to the machine and we'll sew our basting stitch to hold the backing on, hold this in place, and at the same time give us a placement pattern around the cathedral window. Okay, I quickly have already checked under here to make sure my backing fabric didn't flip over. I have a water-soluble thread in the machine, and my fabric 1 flipped over, so now it's going to do that placement and tack down and stitch all at one time. Okay, now that our backing fabric is on and our placement stitch has been stitched on there, our next step is we're going to put thread D in the needle and also in the bobbin. Now that our backing fabric is on, I just want you to make sure that you turn off your automatic thread cutter for the remainder of the block, and you're going to watch me before I start stitching. After the block is on, I'm going to bring my bobbin thread to the top, and that helps the back of the block look just as pretty as the front. Okay, so I have my thread D in the needle and the bobbin, and I'm going to do a needle down and a needle up, and I'm going to bring that bobbin thread to the top. And I'm going to let it start stitching. And by doing that, it's going to give you a much neater, prettier looking back. Okay, now I have thread B in the needle and the bobbin. And again, I'm going to do needle down and needle up to get that bobbin thread to the top. And it's going to do some more quilting. Now I have my thread A in the needle and the bobbin, and it's going to sew a cute little arch here. So I brought my bobbin thread to the top. It's going to finish with some quilting. Okay, this is our block F1. It has come out of the hoop, and I'm going to trim the block using my embroidered block trimmer by George, or 2.0, and that's one side, any side, and I'll do it slower the next time so you can see what I just did. Any side that is going to be joined to another block, which is this side, and the bottom. Those are the sides that will have another block attached to it. Those are the sides that you're going to use the trimmer by George on. And so you're going to lift up your fabric between the fabric on the front and your battilizer, and you're going to snug that metal edge right up inside there. And then you're going to go ahead and lay it down and use that metal edge to use your rotary cutter on. And same thing there, just put the metal edge between the fabric on the front and the battilizer. This edge, it could be the top of your quilt. I don't know if Aubrey, if you can swing up here, but this is this block right here. So this is the 9-inch and this is the 7-inch example of that. On this one we joined a border block to it, so we trimmed the top edge using the trimmer by George. However, for this example, I'm going to show you how you would trim it if it was going to have binding attached to it. Anytime there's binding attached to it, you're not going to trim with the metal edge trimmer by George. Instead, you're going to turn the ruler side over and you're going to lay the 1/4 inch mark right on that basting stitch, and you're going to cut through all layers. And then you're also going to go around the sides that you did trim with the trimmer by George and trim the fabric on the front, a 1/4 inch from that basting stitch. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this over to the iron. I believe it was step 6 where we laid down the Wonder Tape. First thing we're going to do is remove the Wonder Tape because we don't need it anymore. It was just there to hold that folded edge exactly where we needed it to be. So go ahead and pull it off on both sides. And then you're going to, this is the reason you needed a bias edge, because you're going to be turning this back and make the seamed edge match right up to the water soluble thread that's right there that stitched our pattern. And I'm going to press it in place on both sides like that. And then we'll take it to the regular sewing machine and we'll go ahead and sew a blanket stitch around there. So let's take it to okay, as you can see, I am putting the block on my rolling pin. I do have 2 rolling pins, one for my kitchen and one for pressing these blocks. I'm using a rolling pin because I don't really want to do this on a flat surface because it would kind of squish down my wool batting. So I'm going to use just the tip of my iron, aligning that edge to where that placement stitch was and just giving it a little press. And you can use a ham if you have a ham in your sewing room. If you make clothing, you may have one. And again, I'm just aligning the folded edge to that water soluble thread that's still in there. And with the tip of the iron, go ahead and press it. So we're opening our windows so we can see what's going on outside. But let's go to the regular sewing machine and we'll stitch a blanket stitch on there. Okay, I have matched my needle and bobbin thread. Since we're going to be sewing all the way through the block, we want the same matching thread on the bobbin as well. I have a walking foot on my machine, and I have chosen the smallest, tiniest little blanket stitch that I have. So let's go ahead and I will stitch that on here for you. And I want the edge of it to go right along the edge of where the seam is. Part that's folded back, and it to just take a little tiny bite into the fabric. You don't speed through it, take your time. It's a slight curved edge, so you're going to have to move it slightly as you go. So there's the first one done, and let me go ahead and do it on the other side as well. Like I said, you can choose any color thread you want to show up on there. If you want it to be pretty much invisible, well, you can use invisible thread, or you can use thread that matches your fabric. So there we are. We have our cathedral window block all completed.